Hi, it's Sandy here, and I'm just sitting having a cup of tea by my fire here, and I just thought I'd share a little bit about my day today because, as many of you know, I work with energy and with the roses, but not many of you know that I spent a lot of years working with spaces, working as a house whisperer, whisperess, and an energy alchemist, working with the stories and energies of houses. And today I've been on a consult down in the West Country in England, and I was called because the client was really not feeling comfortable in her house. And the house had been on the market for nearly a year, and only one person had actually been to see the house. And she was really getting to the place of wondering what on earth she was going to do, because she so wanted to move forward with her life, and yet this house was not letting her go. Now, when a house doesn't let you go, it's usually because there is something that needs to be resolved in your relationship with the space. When we buy a house or when we move into a house, it's a relationship just like a partner, a sacred other. We match through the resonance of our hearts. It is our hearts that do the calling. For years, I was a couture wedding dress designer for 18 years. And so I was really familiar with looking at that match. What was it that was the attractor factor that brought the sacred other to us for relationship? A house is no different. We might go and see, a dozen different houses, dozen different houses. But there's usually just one that we go in and we say, yeah, this is it. Or I could live here. Or, you could stop outside and go, this is it. I don't have to look any further. So the client I was working with today moved into this house about 4 years ago. And it was a house that was made up of several different cottages that had been put together. And that's always an interesting story because obviously every aspect, every part of the house is going to have a different memory, within its walls, within its experience. It's going to have a different memory. So as you move from part to part of the house, there's going to be a different experience. And for me, it's all about, does this space expand your energy field or does it contract it? When we go anywhere, if our energy fields are in expansion, we feel good, we feel at ease, we are able to settle, we're able to unpack our energy fields. When we spend time in a space that is a sick building, where perhaps negative things have happened or they're on negative energy streams, then our energy fields automatically contract. And when we spend time with our energy fields in contraction, we can get sick because there's very little energy, a little space around the body for the energy to move around in the auric field. So, going to see this lady today and walking through the space, some of the parts of this building went back to the 1600s. This was, had been a shop, it had been, there was a bit of a dairy at the back. This was, a building that had multitasked, and not only that, the client had brought the spaces together and actually extended and built on them too. So basically, all of the different aspects of the house weren't communicating. So there wasn't a sense of a wholeness of the property. So it was sort of fractured. It had a sort of fractured feel to it. So you can see why when the estate agents, put the details out for sale, why nobody would have been quite sure what was doing the calling. What was this property for sale? Because every different aspect of it had a sort of a different energy to it. So that was my first sense as I walked around. This house is confused. This house doesn't clearly know what its true identity is, and it's still in process of gathering threads that were part of its story together. So I could see initially why the house hadn't sold. So one of the reasons, as I say, would be the fact that the house is not giving out a really clear signal that there is a confused or unclear energy around the house. But sometimes it's also because you haven't completed your story there, that the purpose that the house can be mirroring back to you. So as I walked with the client from space to space, we came across two of the bedrooms, and this was a space with 5 bedrooms. I'm really curious, very, very interesting place from there being lots of little stairways and doorways and one room leading off of another and so on. But at one end of the house, over perhaps one of the oldest parts of the house, there were 2 rooms where there was a particularly odd smell. Now, this is another sort of giveaway for someone who has their antennae up around spaces, as to the fact there's something that needs to be, your attention needs to be drawn to it. So these 2 spaces were part of the original, one of the original cottages. And the more I hung around in one of these rooms, the more I became aware that there was a woman sort of slumped over in one corner, in spirit, not in person. And she sort of looked at me sideways. And we started a little dialogue. I'm not clairvoyant. I don't see spirits. I sense them. I'm clairsentient and clairaudient. And over the hundreds of consultations that I've done, I've had quite a few conversations with spirit energies that have been caught in places. And spirit energies are really interesting. There's 2 different types of energy that hang around in spaces. One is a spirit energy, which is a fragment of a soul of someone who has been conscious, who's been here in person. And that is, for me, that's a spirit energy. And the other energies that hang around in spaces are entity energies. And entity energies are created through negative thought forms. So, it's like an accident black spot. If you have an argument in a space, the energy of it hangs around in the space, and anybody walking in afterwards would go, "Oh, you could cut the air with a knife," or "the air was blue." We know these things. We can sense these things. So, the memories of whatever happens in a space hang around, and if that happens over a repeated program, and I've been places where people have said, I don't know why, but we always argue in that room. Never anywhere else in the house. We only ever argue in that room. So, you can imagine that if there is a matrix of energy in a house that, where if you walk into it and you're not particularly consciously aware, you can get triggered. You can get triggered into the same behaviours that have created the energy. So that's what I would call entity energy, and that over a period of time can get quite, technical term here, gloopy. It can get sticky, and really make the energy of a room feel heavy and low and with very, very little chi. So today I had some of that in different spaces. Different spaces had different sort of feels and energy levels in them. But what I was interested in was this one particular room where this lady was, well, she wasn't, I mean, she was a woman. As I spoke with the client later on, as we went round to do some clearing work in the house together, because I always work actually with the client because it's her story, not mine. She was attracted to the place. So the client herself was aware of this energy of this lady in spirit. And I said to her, you know, I get a sense that she's not that old. She's in her perhaps early 20s. And she said, what I'm hearing is 23. So what we had here was an energy, a spirit, a lady in spirit who was just 23 years old. And as I tuned in further, it was clear that we were going right back to 1695. And what she told me was that her young child had died. And I sensed that it was something of a plague type energy. It wasn't influenza, it wasn't smallpox, which would have been waves of virus that had gone through. But it felt to me that it had sort of plague energy to it. And so this woman was distraught. And the more I've worked with spirit energies, the more I've come to understand that actually a spirit energy in a house has been caught because of trauma, emotional trauma in the heart field. So if you can imagine that the heart field is like a nautilus shell, you know, it can expand exponentially and compress exponentially, like the Fibonacci spiral. And when we've got trauma, when we've got memories, and when we've got wounded places that we haven't dealt with, it makes that heart field very much stickier to open. So when someone is carrying a lot of trauma or unprocessed emotional stories, it's much, much harder for them to actually just release and let go at the time of passing. So sometimes a fragment of the soul will go back to the seat of the trauma and get stuck. You know, it's spirits don't hang around in hospitals or mortuaries or graveyards. They are the places where entity energy hangs around and feeds. The spirit will go back to the seat of the trauma, seeking resolution, trying to find some place of comfort and healing for the trauma on the heart field. So when I find that I'm working with a client or working with a house where there's a stuck spirit energy, all that is called for is the open heart and the listening. To listen to the wound, to listen to where the story was that got the energy caught into the space. And as some of you will have heard the story of my last wedding dress shop, which was my way shower into working these energies, because I had my last wedding dress shop was in the late 90s, and I had a spirit in the basement in my wedding dress shop, and my staff didn't want to stay on the premises, and I was forced to find a way of connecting and releasing the spirit energy. So that's what happened today. I worked with the client, and in that beautiful heartfelt holding of this young woman and her trauma at losing her her young boy, her small child, she was able to ready herself to be released. And so yeah, that's been my day today, working with the client to clear the different energies out of the different spaces in the house. And then I work with the roses, and I've got a beautiful heart bowl, a singing bowl, that I work with at the end of the process. And I put all of the rose energies out on the table, and invite the client or clients to select the roses that they're drawn to, so that I can do a reading and put these rose energies into the bowl, so that as we move through the space, each room starts to fill with the heart harmonic and the roses, so that it becomes a cohesive whole. So it brings the beating heart of the house into wholeness again. So it's been an interesting day today, releasing the lovely lady in spirit, and clearing the entity energy and the sludge that was in various places in the house, and allowing the heart of the house to start to sing again. So I'm really looking forward to find out whether there was, peaceful sleep in the house tonight, whereas it has been disturbed over the last few weeks, and also to find out whether she very quickly sells or lets the property, because it's ready now. It's ready to find someone new to move in, to love it. So there we are. I just thought I'd share a little bit about my story today, and a little bit about the work that I do in working with houses. Because, this is our inner temple, this heart space here, and we do a lot of work in refining, our food and decluttering and space clearing and keeping our space healthy. And it's really important that we have this sacred temple for the soul. Our houses should be charge capacitors. We should feel safe, nourished, inspired, and energized in our houses. And we should be surrounded by things that we love. It's said, isn't it, that unless it's beautiful or useful, why would you want to have it around you? So, there we are. I will go back to my tea and the fire, and I wish you a lovely evening or a lovely day wherever you are, and with much love and rosy blessings. Bye. Bye.